Well, I think there are a few secrets that we could disclose that we have found that are very important for the Finnish education system and model. The first one has been realizing that equality, inclusion and quality works hand in hand. And for us, it's been very important to build our education system on the foundation that we really provide equal opportunities for all children and all our students, and that there are no closed doors in our education system. So if you want to go to vocational education after primary education, you can continue to university if you want to. And this is, I think, also important for our young students to know that there's always doors open and equal opportunities for everybody. The second secret is teachers. We have invested a lot in teachers and also seen how important they are for our education system and for quality in education. And I think what's special for the Finnish model is that we put a lot of trust in teachers, in their professional skills, professionalism. We have no standardized testing in primary education or school inspections, but we really want to tell teachers that we trust you to know what you're doing in the classroom because you are the experts on teaching and on pedagogics. And a third secret would be collaboration, working together with a lot of stakeholders when we do education policy on a national level, teachers' unions, universities, so that we are also sure that what we do is based on research. So we have asked the right questions and hopefully also gotten the right answers.
And I've heard a lot also about teachers being listened to also by authorities, by government, by power. That's the collaboration is about also dialogue and conversation between the teachers and students, as well as the decision makers.
Yes, when we talk about trust in the system, it's really based on us trusting that teachers should have a lot of autonomy in their work. So they decide on assessment, they decide on teaching methods. They are also involved in making both local and national curricula, which of course is very important for the implementation of these national curriculums. And also I've said as a minister that the one most important stakeholders when we do laws on educational policy is the teachers' union. So really working together with teachers' representatives also when we decide on what's going to happen in our education system.
That's wonderful. When a lot of people are afraid of unions, you actually embrace them and bring them in order to make decisions.
Yes, because we've seen that this collaborative model of working really works very well. And I think from a policy point of view, it's also brought stability in a way to our education system, that we all agree on the big lines of policy. We might disagree on smaller things, but when it comes on the big issues of equality, teachers' education, equal opportunities, we are all on the same page.
What was the trigger in the Finnish model? What made the Finnish model shift towards this success?
Well, I would say that if you look at Finland from a historical perspective, I would say that the important thing was that Finnish policymakers, decision makers understood the role and the power of education, and that they were brave enough to make some very bold decisions when it comes to education policy. 100 years ago, or a little more than 100 years ago, Finland was not the country it is today, but it was quite a poor and rural society that just got its independence after being under Russian rule and Swedish rule for centuries before that. And there was even a civil war within the country just a year after the independence. So from these circumstances in 100 years, we have gone to being a welfare society with a knowledge-based economy, many times been called the happiest nation in the world. And I think the one most important decision that was made was that decision makers decided to build an education system that was common for everybody, based on this idea of equal opportunities, a public education system, one system for all, free of charge. And I think that one decision has had the most impact on equality in Finnish society and really kind of shows the transformative power of education. Well, I think when you talk about education policy, I think it's important that policymakers address, acknowledge and remember that we cannot just copy a system and put it into another country. I mean, each policymaker, each country has its own challenges, its own opportunities, its own issues that it needs to address and take into consideration when we talk about education policy. So no, it's just, we can't just copy a model from one place to another. But at the same time, I think identifying certain key factors, the role of teachers or the role of trust, equal opportunities, these certain type of key factors that then each country's policymakers can think about, how can we work around these in my country? What does this mean? What could trust mean in my education policy system? Or how can we raise the education level of teachers here? So I think identifying these core elements is important. Well, of course, I mean, the whole idea in the Finnish system is that all children and youth are entitled to education. So when refugee children come to Finland, of course, they have the right to participate in education. But I also see it as the obligation of society to then address the needs of children that have just moved to the country in a sufficient manner so that we can provide them with sufficient language skills, for example. Not so easy always, because Finnish is quite a difficult language and a small one, also on a global scale to learn. And that we as policymakers address issues such as racism and discrimination and try to see both kind of the visible forms of discrimination and of course address them and work against it in schools, but also different types of invisible obstacles that we might have in our societies or in our education system that creates obstacles for children who have moved to Finland and obstacles for them to be able to kind of fulfill their own potential and use the opportunities that we want to give them. So policymakers must address also these invisible obstacles and try to remove them. I think the key messages that I want to talk about has to do with teachers and trust in teachers, has to do with collaboration with different stakeholders, and also about the role of investing in education, the importance of looking at education not as expenditure but as an investment. And I think it's really important getting heads of state to talk about education also from this perspective, because it gives it even more weight in a way.
And COVID has taught us some things about teachers, hasn't it?
Yes, I think COVID has been a very good reminder for all of society that teaching and education and learning is not just about a certain amount of facts being transferred from a teacher to a child and then transferred onwards on a paper for a test. But really that learning and teaching education has so much to do with us developing skills, growing as human beings, developing skills that has to do with thinking and critical thinking and analyzing, especially in this very complex world that we live in nowadays, developing socio-emotional skills, working together with other people. And none of this is possible unless people are together physically and interact with each other. So I think the pandemic has really reminded us of the role and importance of schools as communities. That I got involved in a student organization when I was on upper secondary level. And we were very passionate about issues such as school democracy. We are thinking a lot about kind of the role, what are the role of students and pupils. Like, the teachers are there, the policymakers are there, but what's our role and how can our voice be heard? How can we be more involved in decision making in schools and so on? So that was where I started, and then ending up in politics. I have been working a lot with education policy. So I think this also, I try to take this with me, my own history in reminding myself of the importance that we engage with youth and that they participate as equals at as many places as possible, because all of the big global challenges that we face now climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, they will affect the youth so much more and for such a longer time than for us. So we have an obligation, in my opinion, to engage with them and make them participate in forums such as this and summits such as this and the discussions and debates that are going on here.
Today was the first day, was the Youth Day. Were you inspired by the young people around you?
Absolutely. Yes. And I think it's very important that their voice is heard and that they have a strong presence here.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you.